Hello everyone, my name is Sarah and I'm going to be doing my term project on the Torres Strait Islander people. So here's a map of the Torres Strait Islands. As you can see in the middle there. They're a group of over 200 islands scattered between Australia and Papua New Guinea. Only 17 of the islands are currently inhabited. And along with the Australian Aboriginal people, the Torres Strait Islanders were the first human inhabitants of this region, which means they've been living on these islands for thousands of years. And lastly, the islands became part of Queensland, which is an Australian state, in 1901. Language. So the Torres Strait Islander people had two prominent traditional languages. The first one is Miriam Mir, which was spoken in the Eastern Islands, and the second one is Kala Laga Ya, which was spoken in the Western and Central Islands. Government policies were put in place to prohibit the Torres Strait Islander people from speaking these languages, and so they lost a great deal of their traditional language and culture as a result of this. Most islanders now speak Creole, which is a mixture of Australian English and their traditional languages. This developed after European colonization as missionaries came to the islands. Culture. The Torres Strait Islander people have a very distinct culture and practices from Australian Aboriginal people, so they should not be mistaken for one another. Each island has its own style of dance. Dance was used and is still used for celebrations and ceremonies, as well as a way of displaying their identity. Their style of dance is usually a coordinated series of stamping and leaps. And as you can see on the picture, this is a dari. It is a traditional feathered headdress. It consists of a row of feathers attached to an arched cane border. The feathers are clipped to represent fish tails. Vertical cane lines across the center symbolize forehead creases that appear when you're thinking hard, and so they are a sign of wisdom. Traditionally, these headdresses were used during war, but became dance apparel with the arrival of missionaries to the islands. And the dari, as you can see on the other picture, is actually found on the Torres Strait flag, as it is a sacred symbol for these people. So the islanders used many different musical instruments as well. They used rattles, flutes, panpipes, and drums mainly. After influence of the missionaries who wanted to abolish traditional song and dance, and the introduction of new instruments, the Torres Strait Islander people came up with a rich blend of styles that created a distinctive new island music style. And songs are still often performed for festive occasions within the islands. Ceremonies. So the first ceremony of the Torres Strait Islander people I will be talking about is the tombstone opening ceremony. It is a principal island ritual and actually a very joyous event where the grave marker of a deceased individual is formally revealed to all family members and friends. It can occur years after the death of the individual. It contains a feast and dancing. Secondly is the coming of light ceremony, which takes place on July 1st. This ceremony commemorates the date of the arrival of the first missionaries to the Torres Strait Islands. It includes feasting, dancing, and singing. So for ceremonial costume, the Torres Strait Islander people wore sacred masks as well as other traditional garments, including headdresses. The dari, as mentioned earlier, was worn in the coming of light ceremony. Dependence on natural world and spirituality. So like many Aboriginal peoples, the Torres Strait Islanders have a strong connection to and respect for the land. The waterways surrounding the islands are home to diverse marine life and other resources. The Torres Strait Islanders relied on these waterways for fishing and trade. Marine environment is therefore very important, both physically and spiritually, to the Torres Strait Islanders. The Torres Strait Islander people are united by their connection to Tagi, who is a fisherman and spirit being believed to have created the world. Tagi is represented by a constellation, as you can see in the picture here. The laws, customs, and practices of the islanders are shaped by Tagi stories. They use this constellation to guide them. The Torres Strait Islanders have deep knowledge of the stars and sea, which provides them with important information regarding changes in the weather and seasons, when to plant, as well as when to hunt certain animals. Religious beliefs. The Torres Strait Islander people's indigenous religion focused on culture heroes and mythological beings. Creation myths were used in their religion to bring social and cultural practices into being. Unfortunately, few traces of their indigenous religious beliefs remain today due to the arrival of missionaries on the islands and conversion. So the first Christian missionaries arrived in the Torres Strait Islands in 1871. The Torres Strait Islander people adopted Christianity in the late 19th century, and to this day, that is still the predominant religion among islanders. The arrival of the Christian missionaries is still celebrated annually with the Coming of Light ceremony that was mentioned earlier in the presentation. History and colonization. Until the mid-1800s, Torres Strait Islander people were actually quite separate from the rest of the world. They were autonomous and had their own unique economic systems, worldviews, and social structures. Each island maintained their own distinct culture and language, despite similarities, and although they were linked to one another through trading and ceremonial practices. In 1863, Europeans established settlement on the Torres Strait Islands. This had a profound impact on the islanders and their culture. Not long after European settlement, it was actually discovered that there was a large quantity of pearls in the island's regions, which led to the establishment of the pearling industry on the islands. This exhausted many of the island's natural marine resources. Many of the Torres Strait Islander people also faced abuse from the pearlers and trip-hangers, who were fishermen that also came to the island to benefit from its abundant marine life. In an attempt to control the lawlessness occurring and regulate the two commercial marine industries, the colonial government of Queensland officially annexed the islands in the 1870s. The Queensland government introduced severely restrictive laws to control the Torres Strait Islander people. This caused them to lose their rights and freedoms until they regained them in the 1960s. The Torres Strait Islander people became Australian citizens in 1967. Current-day Islander people. In 2017, a Torres Strait Islander woman was elected to Queensland Parliament for the first time in history. Her name was Cynthia Liu, and she was actually born in the Torres Strait Islands. Her being elected provides hope for islanders that they will receive the recognition from the government that they so need and deserve. Recently, the government has tried to transform all Indigenous people into regular citizens by making them give up their Indigenous status. However, the problems that Torres Strait Islanders are facing cannot be fixed by simply making them eligible for the regular welfare benefits provided to all citizens. They require a comprehensive program of economic, social, and cultural rehabilitation to regain what was taken from them. Torres Strait Islander people and Australian Aboriginal people both have higher rates of hospitalization due to self-harm and suicide. Mainstream healthcare services often neglect cultural factors that influence the social and emotional well-being of patients. There are now new research projects being conducted that seek to develop guidelines for practitioners to provide culturally safe and effective treatment for Indigenous people. They are encouraging practitioners to identify social and cultural resources that can support healing from the underlying issues related to suicidal thoughts and self-harm. Reflection. So it is obvious that there is no denying the intergenerational effects present among the Torres Strait Islander people due to their mistreatment in the past by the pearling industry, fishing industry, colonizers. They were there's a great deal of a lack of respect and compassion shown to these people. And this is not something that can go away overnight or with a little bit of funding. This mistreatment of an entire peoples is a deep-rooted issue that impacts them and their children and their grandchildren, and that is still very present today in the statistics that I just explained about the high rates of self-harm and suicide among Torres Strait Islander people. So this parallels with Canadian Indigenous peoples in many ways. It can also be paralleled between Aboriginal Indigenous people. Indigenous people all over the world were extremely mistreated, seen as lesser, seen as needing to change, and that they were inferior, and that their ways of respecting the land and their Indigenous practices and culture, this just was not respected, and the sad reality is that mindset is still present within our world today. And so I hope that this presentation got you thinking. I hope that it got you to reflect on your own mindset and where your ideas about Indigenous people have come from, what they look like, how you treat Indigenous people that you encounter within your own life. And anyone can really make a difference. It doesn't have to be, a big saving the world concept. It's about changing this colonial mindset that has had such a profound negative impact on our Indigenous people all over the world. And so just reflecting on yourself and your own mindsets really provides hope for a future where all peoples can live and respect one another together. And finally, here are my references. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.